Welcome to the Brass and Woodwind Shop. It is fairly common for hinge rods to be stuck on woodwind instruments. There are two common reasons why hinge rods get stuck. One is that the key gets bent and the hinge rod bends with the key, and that makes it hard to unscrew the hinge rod. Usually, if that happens, you can try to straighten the key out while it is still on the instrument, or at least you can straighten it enough to get the hinge rod out. More commonly, though, the hinge rod gets stuck because it gets rusty, and when it rusts inside of the key, what happens is the hinge rod expands, but the key does not. When that happens, usually it is very difficult to get the screw out without damaging something. If the key has just started to rust, it may not be that bad, and you may be able to get it out with a little bit of work, but usually it is very rusted in there, and there's a good chance that you're going to do some damage when you try to pull it out. Since you do not know how stuck the hinge rod is when you start with the simple things and then work your way up to the more aggressive things. There are a lot of techniques you can use to do this repair, and I'm not going to cover all of them in this video, so look in the description below for links to other videos. The techniques that I'm going to use on this repair, I do not use on every repair. Usually I only do this on the hinge rods that are very stuck. If you are going to try this repair, I suggest that you use other techniques first, and only use these techniques if you need to, if all the less invasive techniques have failed. I'm going to start by putting some penetrating oil on the hinge rod. The penetrating oil usually does not work in and of itself to get the key unstuck, but you can put it in there and it does not hurt and it might help. So I always put that in there. Then I'm going to heat that up to try to get the penetrating oil in. This clarinet came into my shop just like it is now. All of the keys were off, and somebody already tried to get the hinge rod off. You can tell that the post and the hinge rod are already marred, and that is going to make it a lot harder to work with. So there are not really a lot of options for me at this point. There really are only two things I can try. Normally there are a few other things I would try first, but at this point there's not really a lot I can do with the post and the hinge rod already damaged. Before you do any work on the stuck hinge rod, you need to know where the hinge rod is stuck. It may be stuck on the tube that is part of the key, or it may be stuck on a post, either one post or the other or both, or it could be stuck all three places. The way you can tell is if the key moves at all, then you know it is not stuck over the whole range of the hinge rod. And then you can look at the hinge rod, then watch to see if the hinge rod moves as the key goes up and down. And in this case, yes, the hinge rod does move, so the hinge rod is stuck to the tube on the key. If the key moved and the hinge rod did not move, you would know that the hinge rod was stuck on the post, either one post or the other or both. Probably 9 times out of 10, the hinge rod will be stuck on the key and not on the posts. What I'm going to do now is get this post out of the way, and I'm going to unscrew that. Most posts are threaded into clarinets. Sometimes on some plastic clarinets they are force fit into there, and sometimes they're melted in, but usually they're threaded, and almost all, if not all, wooden clarinets, they're going to be threaded in there. Now there is a little more room for me to work with this. Since the head of the screw has already been damaged, there's not a lot that I can do with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my vise and I'm going to squeeze the post in the vise. And I'm going to squeeze that pretty hard. What I'm trying to do now is squeeze the hinge rod in the post so that the hinge rod stays where it is, and when I move the key, hopefully the key gets unstuck and the key starts moving. If that happens, I can loosen up the junk that's inside of there, and then I can probably get the key out without that much effort. When I do this, I need to be able to see the hinge rod to see if it is moving or not, and I also need to be able to move the key. So I'm going to move the key and watch the hinge rod and see if the hinge rod moves. Now I'm hoping that the hinge rod does not move. Okay, there. The hinge rod is not moving. That means I got the hinge rod freed up inside of the key. I'm going to take some key oil and I'm going to put a drop right in there and there. And what that's going to do is it's going to help lubricate this. I'm going to work that back and forth for a while. It still feels a little bit stiff. So if I work it for a while, I'm going to work it until it feels not quite so stiff, which will probably be a few minutes. I've worked the key for a few minutes and it's a lot more loose than it was, so I'm going to pull that out. But keep in mind, if you do this, it will make a tiny little flat spot in the post. It's hard to even see. You cannot really even tell it's there unless you look closely. But it is there, so just know that you're going to do that when you do this technique. Now I'm going to try to remove this the normal way with a screwdriver. I'm going to see if it comes out. Let's see. Like I say, they did damage this post when they put it in, so I think now it is stuck on the post because of the damage that was on there. Before it was stuck on the rust on the hinge rod, but I think that now it is more stuck on the post than it is on the hinge rod. So I think I'm going to need to file down the burrs on the post, and then it may work. I'm going to try to clean up the rough spots with the file. So I'm going to file that down a little bit, just enough to clean it up so that it can come out. I'm going to try it again, and I need to be careful because I am going to be pushing pretty hard on the blade of the screwdriver, and if it slips, I do not want it either scratching up the clarinet or poking myself. So what I'm doing is I'm using my thumb to guide it, and if it slips, it's just going to slip like that, and it's going to miss both the clarinet and my hand. Try to loosen that up. I still don't know if it is going to come out at all. I'm watching the hinge rod, see if the hinge rod is moving at all. The hinge rod is still not moving, so I think I'm going to have to file that down all the way and then cut a new slot in there. Yes, it will take some material off of the post, but it's not going to be enough to make a big difference. Now I'm going to take a jeweler's saw with a very fine blade on it, and I'm going to cut a new slot in the hinge rod. And this does cut the post also, but you don't really have a lot of choice. I did not go very deeply into there because I did not want to mess up the post more than it already is. So that should be enough room though for me to get the hinge rod out. So I'm going to work the hinge rod and see if I can get it out. So now I'm going to try another technique. I put the screwdriver in the slot, I turn the screwdriver with the key, and then I hold the screwdriver firm and push down on the key, and then that works the screw out slowly, and it takes some time to do this, but usually it gets it out without too much problem. When you do this, you need to be very careful to not let the screwdriver slip, and that could mar up the clarinet or make a hole in your hand. This is still not coming out very easily, so I'm going to loosen up the hinge rod again on the key. So, okay, the hinge rod is not moving, so that means I am loosening it up some more. So I'm just going to work that back and forth again for a little while. It works the oil in there, it helps to loosen up the rust. Okay, now I'm going to see if that helped at all. It is still quite stuck, and these things take a lot of patience. You just need to do whatever you need to do to get that hinge rod out with the least amount of damage possible. A lot of times when the hinge rods are stuck, they are really stuck, and you really cannot get it out without damaging the instrument. But if you can just damage the hinge rod, then that's the best, because hinge rods are easy to replace. You also will usually get damage on the post, but if you can keep the damage down to a minimum, usually you can salvage the post. But do not damage the body of the clarinet, and also try to protect the key. I tried the screwdriver. I got it about 1/6 of a turn before it stopped working. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put it in here, squeeze that, and then I'm going to push down on this, and then take that off, and then do that. And what that's going to do is it's going to move it just a tiny little bit at a time. And yes, this will take a while, but it should loosen it up to the point where I can start working with it again. Once this screw starts working its way out, then you can grab onto it with the pliers and work its way out that way. So I'm going to keep doing that. Just push down and then let up on the pressure and push it up, and then watch the screw to see that the screw does turn with it. So the screw needs to turn when it is not in the vise when you're pushing it up, and then when it's in the vise the screw should not turn, and that's going to work it out. If it is a different key on a clarinet or a flute or some other instrument, it's the same principle, but you just have to think through which direction you need to go to work the screw out. And again, this way it does damage the post, but it's a balancing act in your mind. You need to figure out how much is going to be damaged by getting it out and how much is going to be damaged by just leaving it in or doing it a different system. So now I'm going to try it again and see if this comes out. The screwdriver is still not working too well, so I guess I'm just going to keep doing this for a while. And it will come out, but it's only going to be a small fraction of a turn at a time. And once you get the system going, it does speed up a little bit. I used the device for a while, and I got the screw so that it came out 2 turns, and that's enough to start to get a hold of it. So now I'm going to use a pliers on it and get it out that way. Usually I do not use a pliers on instruments, but sometimes it does work. So I'm going to hold on to the screw and then just work its way out. Okay, now it seems to be coming out easily. Now it is finally starting to come out. So I'm just going to spin that around until the threading lets go on the post right there. It's probably getting pretty close. Okay, there we go, yep. And it came out, and the hinge rod is very rusty. If the hinge rod has been damaged or shortened too much, you may need to replace it, but I think this one is okay. I definitely will want to clean up the rust though, because if it starts rusting again, you're going to have the same problem. I'm putting the hinge rod in the bench motor, and I'm going to use some 600 grit sandpaper to clean that up. And turn it around and clean up the other end of it. Because the head of the screw got damaged, I'm going to have to clean that up. So I'm going to do that with a small file. And then I'm going to take the jeweler's saw and cut a slot. I cut a new slot in the hinge rod, and the hinge rod is ready to go into the clarinet now. I also need to clean up the inside of the key, so I have a pipe cleaner. I'm going to use that. And then I'm also going to take some oil, put that on the hinge rod, and work it in the key. Just work it back and forth and spin it around. And that will help clean up any more of the rust that might be inside of the key. Then I'm going to clean up the inside of the key again. And that should be clean and ready to go. And I'm going to put some oil on it. Before I put the key back on, I need to clean up the post. You can see a little bit of damage on there. It's not that bad. It's totally usable. The sides are a little bit flattened, and I also have the slot in there from when I had to cut the slot out of it. So I'm going to neaten that up a little bit. When I'm holding this up to the camera, you can see that, but under normal circumstances, there are going to be keys on the clarinet, and you will not really be able to see this at all. So everything will work fine, and this clarinet will function a lot better now. but there is that tiny little bit of damage that remains. It's a trade-off, but I'd much rather have a clarinet that plays well, even though there's a tiny little slot cut in one of the posts. Now I'm going to put the other post back on. I'm ready to put the lever back on the clarinet. I'm going to put some oil on the hinge rod. The oil helps to lubricate the key, but it also helps to protect the key from rust. It keeps the water and the air from getting at it so that it will not rust again. So I'm going to put that on, and then the repair will be complete. Now the key works like it's supposed to. I hope this video has been helpful. Please subscribe for more band instrument repair videos.